Do you want to get the names on there too?
I've written those down. We can go on. I just want you to look over that consent form and make sure, I don't know whether you want to have your name on it or whether you want to be anonymous. We would be happy to share the transcript with you.
Oh, I don't care. I'm worried about it. So, you want me to sign it?
Yes, please. And of course, this is at these will be added also at the History Center, which you're so involved with.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think we need to do is to share them so that they're not conflicting, so that if you can coordinate it, if you're doing one thing, there's no sense of us doing that.
Right.
Then Barbara can assign somebody, like I have Bill Harris now, who's the mayor of Kitty Hawk. He's going out to interview, I don't know what John's father's name is. It's John A. Watkins' father, who was a commander of the Civil Air Patrol at Manio during World War II, and he's in his 90s, and he's going out to Greensboro interviewing.
Wow.
And Bill volunteered to be on the committee. He said, I got to go out there right now because I thought he was already dead.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, well, that's a lot of the names.
I was a pallbearer, and John was an honorary pallbearer for my buddy that just died down here.
What was that?
And he said, Sidney Willis used to be a magistrate.
You will lose 5 pounds. Go sit upstairs.
Don't talk. So we need to coordinate that whole thing so that you're not duplicating.
Yeah.
And we'll share the tapes with the Park Service if you'll share your tapes with
our
us.
tapes are completely, that's one of
what
the
I
things
mean.
it says up here is, we really hope that these interviews will be available to a broad public and that they'll be at the History Center and at the Park Service. So our intention is definitely to share them. That's why Barbara was so excited about getting the information from you. Thank you.
And, yes, and so...
So if I wanted to send you a transcript, where would I send it to?
P.O. Box 698, Ocracoke, of course, 27960.
All right. And you don't mind my recording?
No.
I've already said that. Using your name? Okay. Well, you already mentioned your aunt, who was the postmistress. Were there any other people in the family history that you could tell me about the family history here on Ocracoke?
Oh, yeah, well, how far back do you want to go?
Well, really we're interested in, and
I've gone
especially...
from 1590 on, so...
Let's start in maybe the 20th century. Might be a good place for us to start, because we're looking at that time period before.
James Horatio Williams, which you've heard of, certainly. His picture's up there on the mantel. That's my great-grandfather.
Oh, see, I'm a novice here.
He was the one that was on he was captain of the Paragon, and he owned it. And during the Civil War, he was cited for gallantry in Southern folklore, because when the war broke out, he actually was in Charleston Harbor, Charleston, South Carolina, when they were firing on Fort Sumter. And he had dropped off a load, and he tried to pick up a new load, and nobody would ship anything.
He was picking up freight?
Yeah, picking up freight. It was a bug-out. It was a two-masted schooner, Paragon. And he couldn't get a load of freight. And when he went to get papers to leave the harbor, they told him he can't leave because the Federals will get you because they got the harbor blockaded. Yeah, he was sort of a stubborn old Englishman. And it was drizzling rain, I guess, and foggy. So that night, we set sail anyway, and out of the harbor, sailed all the way back, came up in Ocracoke, and he knew the waters, so he knew the cows, went on through, and all the way up to the Pamlico Sound, sailed up into the Albemarle Sound, and then up the Roanoke River, where a lot of the lumber had come from to build the Paragon. Yeah. And went up the Roanoke River and scuttled it, put all the sails ashore and all the barrels, and scuttled it in fresh water because it would be preserved. Then he and his two-man crew made their way back to Washington and got a fishing boat coming home, and he became a farmer. And he used to live what we, it's actually Oyster Creek now. It used to be Trent, part of Trent.
And Trent was is here on Ocracoke.
Well, there were two Trents. There was the Trent where Oyster Creek is, and then there was Trent. If you go up where the firehouse is, you go up into that road that used to be over Ammo Dump Road. The list was all Ammo Dump Road, from the base, up here, across here.
Ammo Dump?
Ammo Dump Road. That's what the Navy, that was the first road the Navy built, and that's what it was for. It was a single lane just to take ammunition.
For the Civil War?
No, this was for World War II,
right.
and the Navy built it. But at the end of that road was also Trent. And that's where was our original homestead for my grandfather. And our graveyard is still up there. And, but anyhow, he went back to farming. And then the funny thing that happened during the Civil War was that a lieutenant came with a group of troops or a squad and said, I want to buy 6 head of cattle to feed the troops. And he proceeded to say, I don't sell the damn Yankees. And marched out of the house. He said, if you want them, you'll have to take them. And my great-grandmother was pictured. She married Martha. She was a Martha O'Neill, and she married Jean Horatio Williams. Incidentally, she was his first cousin's daughter.
Oh, well, that happens.
But anyhow, after he left, the lieutenant said, well, I can take him or I can pay you for it. And Martha said, well, if you got the greenbacks, she said, put them under the ballast stone out there on the porch. And he did. He left the money. He was honorable.
Oh, that's good.
So he left the money. But we never did hear whether she ever told grandfather or not
that she got
the money, but she got the greenbacks. And, so that was sort of an interesting story. That's been published many times in a lot of books. And everybody has that story pretty much.
Were you here? Did you come here at all during the?
I used to come every summer.
When did you start coming?
I didn't have vacations. I came to Ocracoke every year, all my life.
And why wasn't that a vacation?
It was a vacation, but in early years it was a vacation when I was young. When I got older, I came down to try and the old house out here. It was 137 years old. And I used to try and do all the work that should have been done 365 days a year. I tried to do in 2 weeks.
No one was living in the house? Or?
My father and mother were in it for, they stayed in it, grandparents died in 54. And we let cousin Jim Williams, my uncle, let him stay in it for a year or two. And then my father and mother used to come down and spend about half the year and live in it.
So in all those years, in the years that you were coming down as a child, and you came during the period that the Park Service was moving in?
Well, I didn't come for a good part of that because I moved to, let's see, I went into the Korean War. I was in the Naval Reserve for 4 years, and I went in the Army in 52. And from 52 to 55, I served over in Korea and Japan for 3 years. And then I came back, and I was one of the first 8 people in nuclear power.
One of the first what people?
I was one of the first 8 people in the Army's nuclear power program for nuclear reactors. Used to be used as atomic energy. And they sent me off to the University of Virginia, and then to Argonne National Labs in Chicago, and started at the EWR. And then they sent me on to Idaho, and I worked on 4 or 5 of the first power plants in the world.
So you missed like 10 years?
So I was out of here for just about 10 years. In 66, I came back and I moved my family back to Pittsburgh. Get back closer to the grandchildren. And then we started coming down every year again. Started patching it up.
So when between the time you left and went into the service and the time you came back, what would you say was the most striking change or difference that you
Road. That's what changed all of Ocracoke, was putting in the road. Because if people had to come the way when we came by Hatteras, they floated us across in the barge, the Oregon Inlet, and it was all soft sand all the way to Manio. And the mosquitoes and the green flies and all that, and you getting out and push, and the place was flooded, and it was a rough trip. And everybody carried food, extra clothes, because you never knew if you were going to get here or get away.
But did you ever have any exciting incidents?
I ate more meals in Coast Guard stations, and we used to make spaghetti and meatballs all the time. Key Island Station, and Oregon Inlet Station, and they all knew my granddad because he was in the life-saving service until 1915, I guess, when it became the Coast Guard.
So your dad grew up here.
My dad grew up here, and my grandfather, and
all the way
back.
And so you're the first one to leave.
My father was.
Your father.
He went over in 1914, but then he died back then. He died. He was 97 and a half. He just died in 92.
Right here in this.
Well, we got him over in Delaware.
Did he ever talk about the way things had changed?
Oh, yeah. But at the end, he got Alzheimer's and didn't realize what was going on. But in my books, I try and describe what Ocracoke was like. It was all, you have to picture it, Ocracoke. If you want to see what it was like, you go out on the beach. In the soft sand. I don't know high water mark. Between the sand dunes and the high water mark is all soft sand.
Right.
But when you walk somewhere, it was very tiring.
Yeah.
And it was hot sand. And this island was really split in two. There was the point side, there were pointers and creekers. And this side was the creek, and there were trenners. And frankly, there were two single passenger footbridges for Winnie's Gut that went down point. So we went down point. We went over this little footbridge. Yeah. And there were two of them. And they were long, long footbridges. So to go from up here down there, it didn't happen very often, even though they're all related. They're all relatives. Yeah. And then if you went to Trent, of course, that was further up away again.
The Trent that was down there, not the Trent
that was... It was up here, on this side along the side.
Up along Animal Road, at the end of Animal Road.
Yeah, at the end of Animal Road. That was Trent. And, but if you know where Blackbeard's Lodge is, that used to be the Stanley Wayhab Inn. You had the dance hall, the Spanish Casino was out here at the end of the road on the left, and that hotel. We had much more then than we have today for entertainment. Today you can't accommodate all the people because we get like, I think I did an estimate last year. And we had over 11,000 people in this village in any one day in the summer, and it's worse this year. So I haven't run any checks this year, but there's a lot more rooms now, and they're all full. And there's just so many people, you really can't accommodate them.
So when you were younger, when you were a teenager, did you go to the dance hall?
Oh, everybody went.
What was that like?
The first thing, that Stanley Wayhab Hotel, to the left was a theater. The left side of it. The right side, for a good while, they had a skating rink.
A roller skating rink?
A roller skating rink. We used to have a greased pig.
Oh, really?
And from the movie, it was 3 or 4 days a week. In fact, I had tickets from the theater in 1939. And this Blanche that I told you, Blanche Jolliffe, interviewed, she was at Howard. She used to sell the tickets, and so did my aunt. And then my Uncle Wayhab used to run the movies. And at any rate, you go from the movies, then you go to the dance hall, the Spanish Casino. During World War II, they put an outdoor dance floor also. So you had an outdoor and an indoor.
Well, what kind of music was playing? Was it live music?
Yeah, it was all live music. There were no jukeboxes at that time. It was all live music, with fiddler and guitar and what have you. And they had square dances and regular dances. And everybody went from anywhere from 2 to 100, and they all went. And it was a family affair, and they lived there. Problems. It was a dry island. There was nothing to drink here. However, there were a lot of drunks laying in the sand tracks, but that was from moonshine. They used to make real wine. But from that hotel out there, which is Blackbeard's Lodge now, from there out to the ocean was Boiled Beach. You got pictures of it. There was nothing there. Now you got a highway, you got stores, you got houses. There was absolutely nothing. In fact, every time there was a storm, the ocean would come over, and we'd go out in the puddles after the storm and pick up flounders that were marooned up in the puddles on the beach.
Because there were no dunes there either, right?
No, it was flat. There were a few dunes, like where the Loop Shack was. I don't know if you know where that is now. Like if you go past Buffy's going out Howard's Pub, the first sign out of the village on the left that says, and it's facing the other way coming in, where it says 20 miles an hour, there's a hill there. But right when you go up on that hill, that was the only dunes out there, big ones, and that was Loop Shack Hill. And the footings and all are still up there. In fact, there's a building and the foundation from the other buildings where the loop shack was. And that was
What's a loop shack?
It was
What
called
is
a
it
loop
called?
shack, and it was classified until 1976. And what it was the first radar and detection system for submarines and all.
So it was put there for World War II,
It
or?
was World War II. They put that up while they were building the base. They built that and they manned that before they even manned the base.
Now, where was the base?
The base was down, if you know where well, let's see. You know where the piers started. When you come to the end of the road before you go to the museum on the right, Park Service and all that,
Yeah.
that whole thing there, the gate was right there, the main gate. And that was all naval base down there. And what they did was there were 4 families living there and had that property at the time. There was Thaddeus Scarborough, Charlie C. Scarborough. There was
So they're related to Al Scarborough?
yes, this is grandfather, and then there was the Scotts had a house there, big house, and George O'Neill and Annabelle had a house there.
And they're related to you. George O'Neill, is he a relative of yours?
Yeah, they're all related. They're all related, even the Hatteras.
Oh.
And anyway, they forced them to sell, and they all sold the property and lost it.
Yeah.
So the funny part was my granddad, his brother was dead, John, and he leased 47 acres up the end of that road from the firehouse going up. And that was the ammo dump. He fenced it all in, but he leased the 47 acres until the war was over. And after the war was over, we got the property all back. Now it's all been sold. It was split 6 ways in 6 areas. But
so what's there now? New
it's just
vacation
houses
homes?
and there's some people, some of our families, some of them still live up there and have homes, but a lot of it's been sold to other people who just own homes, so they can come down and they rent them out, just like everywhere else in the island. But actually, and I come off of, let's see, I come off of 5 of the original families. Double off the Howells, the original William Howard. I came off of Susan, his daughter. She married Francis Jackson. And Francis Jackson and she had 2 daughters that married 2 of the O'Neills that came from Hatteras about
So
1740.
2 sisters married 2 brothers?
About 1740. Some of them met the same. They came from Chicken-Conoco and Hatteras. And see, that's the Jacksons. That means I'm double off the Jacksons also because he married Francis Jackson, Chris Jackson here. And then my great-grandmother that I told you about, her grandmother was a Jackson. So that makes me triple off the Jacksons, double off the Howards, triple off the first William, John Williams. I'm triple off the O'Neill line.
So you really are dug deep in the soil.
And then this Blanche Howard, she loves history and things too, and genealogy. And she said, Earl, I put my biography in back to the books I've written. She said, you forget, do you remember Mary Elizabeth? The grave's not marked up next to Christopher, was born in 1700 or something. You remember Mary Elizabeth? She was a Tolson. So you're also off the Tolson family.
So all these, do you still have these names here in this village?
Yes, all those names
Jackson,
still exist.
O'Neill,
Yeah,
Howard.
on Hatteras, they're here. In fact, I had a fellow come down. He's off the Hatteras O'Neills. It didn't come this way, and somebody sent him to me to trace his family. And he's from he's a retired naval officer up in Chesapeake. We drove down to that meeting last night to meet him, and I found his grandfather and all of them. They were up in Chicken-Conoco, and then they moved north. They were all in the life-saving service.
Well, what brought your family down from the Hatteras?
Don't know. You have to realize before 1846, there was no Oregon Inlet, there was no Hatteras Inlet. It was all one peninsula. And so people lived all along this island. They lived all along Hatteras, all the way where the inlets are. There was families. In fact, Mesa Simpson lived right where the inlet opened up. And he moved to the other side, to Hatteras, and because he was an Ocracoke before that. great-grandmother used to walk to Hatteras to visit her cousins, and the Odins up there are also tied to us.
She used to walk from here?
Yes.
How long did that take her?
I have no idea. However, I got a picture of Judge Parker from New York and 4 generations of Parkers, and I got this picture. It was tinted from 1904, and he was quite old then. And this was in her old cheroot box. She kept all those old pictures and things. And now that I think about it, there's Parker's Creek up there on the way, and that's a beautiful part of the island. And I would just bet. And she used to stay in houses on the way.
Yeah.
And she stayed in their house. And they were probably from New York, and they weren't always here. They probably come down to hunt and things. And she probably stayed in their house. And then we had camps along there too. Dick's camp. Well,
so was your family involved in any of those, hunting guides and fishing guides? How were they involved?
In fact, well, there's a lot of the relatives that were actually hunting and fishing guides. The older was a cousin of my father. My father had 49 first cousins, and 8 of them were double first cousins. So I have lots of double cousins now.
So that means both of them, did they marry cousins? Is that how that happened?
Yes. Well, first, second, third cousins. The people I've given 2 lectures recently on World War II from this book, and on the Civil War. And at the festival, I just had 5 of them. They're all double first cousins. Or not first, they're back third to me because they're from my father's first cousins. Yeah. So they're about my third, but they're all double cousins to me. And they're all in their late 70s and 80s. And of course, I'm young, I'm 73.
How did they treat, you were one of the few people that was off island then, of all the cousins. How did they treat you coming back to these?
I've always been treated fine. Some people accept it. Now, if you're an off-islander, there's just a feeling that you never get accepted. And I've heard this from many people. I've never witnessed it. Yet I guess the island has changed completely now. There's so much outside influence. People pick up different ways of life, everything, the language, the characteristics, everything changes. So it's different than what it was. And that's the sad part because people were very friendly when my mother and dad were pretty friends. Come stay with us. To stay with us in my grandma and grandfather's house with my grandma and granddad. And they'd bring him home. And my granddad had a store across the road here until 1912. That's my parking lot over there. That's where his store was. Oh. And he took that down. This is that parking lot. There's 2 wide gates there. See where it's fenced? Yeah. It's got my name on there. That's my parking lot. It's too small to build.
What parks for friends and family?
Friends, yeah. Because that's all they all belong to the same people. They have a hotel here if I didn't have that parking lot sitting there. And I don't want that. I didn't retire here to sit across from the hotel. In fact, I don't like it the way it is. It's all in right now. The whole thing. They're building a store next to me now.
Right
yeah,
here?
And I should have never let him turn that road. And I talked my dad into it because the lady back there, his relatives, and she wanted to use that line, but a church up until 1938 used to be right next to us here outside the fence was the church.
What kind of church was it?
Northern Methodist. And talked to him in 69 to let her turn this path down here next to the fence. Well, it used to go along the back there, went all the way to the Sound, was a wagon track. And that's where they went. And now I've had to pull my fence in to let people get around it in the back because they kept knocking the corner of the fence down. So I bolted it in. Now they just took the woods out here just 3 weeks ago. And they're putting a store, and then they sold 2 lots behind us. So I'm going to have a highway going back here to 2 more houses, which I wouldn't have put up with anyway.
Yeah, even 5 years that I've been here, it's changed so much.
It's unbelievable.
You were talking about the character. One of the things you mentioned was people were friendly. Are there other things about
when I was a kid growing up and I came down, you had to realize there were no roads whatsoever. Right. There were footpaths. And my grandfather used to carry me on his shoulders and things. He was always taking his penknife and cutting brush as he went because he moved the store from here in 1912, and he bought one that used to be A.B. Howard's store on the waterfront. You know where the old post office was, the brick? You probably don't know. You know where Captain's Landing is now? There's a decoy, it's right straight down there. There's a decoy shop. And there's brick building that used to be the post office. In front of that, on the water, is the old second post office. And then there's Captain's Landing. Well, that used to be my grandfather's store down there.
What do you sell? What does your grandfather sell?
Just general merchandise.
That would be.
Pork, fish, and
Would that be everything from food to shoes? And
anything you want. That's what they have as general stores. But in fact, a little bit of history. In 1835, I got the petition. A group of people formed a petition way back before 1835. Everything was basically on the point side as far as all the activity and all. And in 1835, they had put 3 stores on this side of the harbor, which wasn't a harbor. It was a mud. It was Cockle Creek. It wasn't Silver Lake. Silver Lake name came during World War II, and they dredged it out.
yeah.
But it was only about 4 feet deep in the middle. It was a mud pond, really. And all the ships unloaded out in the Sound on the layboats with the flat bottom.
Yeah.
And they'd bring it in here, and they'd go out with the wagon and unload the flat bottom boats on the wagon to bring it ashore. Well, since they had these 3 stores and people had their boats tied off, and they always tied them off the stakes, and you waited out to get your boat. Well, they asked for the court, for this, the senator, magistrate, I guess, or the court, it wasn't magistrate, it was the justice of the court. And the wording in there is beautiful. I read it a couple of my last talks. Yeah, it says there's 3 stores now on the north side harbor, or the creek, and people need to get to the stores and so forth and so on. They need to get to their boats and their livelihood, but there's always, I can't read all the words over now. I got all the signatures on. I typed it, put the original signatures and put under. So there's people that are hungry people or something that are mean, and they're always meddling in other people's business, whether they want it or not. And there will be some that will protest this petition as we speak, and so forth. And it goes, it's beautiful the way it's written in this old lingo that they use. And then I've got the other deed that comes along, and it's got all the prices, William Howard's heirs, John Howard's heirs, and that road was laid out all the way from where the Coast Guard station is today. The one that's still standing, it's closed. But it went from there by John Pike's Garden, all along the waterfront where it's at now, or just about where it is, and it turned up Howard Street and went out Howard Street. Now, the funny part is that this was 167 years ago. Okay, they laid that road out 20 feet wide for a right-of-way. Well, that's all they had was wagon carts with 2-wheel carts. And 20 feet wide. And you know how wide the road is now today?
A lot less than that, isn't it? No?
The white line on both sides, right straight down here, is exactly 19 feet. If you take the aprons, it splits down. It's just about 20 feet wide today. Except when you turn up Howard Street. Howard Street isn't over 10 feet wide. And what they did, it says that they went along and they double notched with a hatchet. They double notched all the trees at the 20-foot width. Well, if they went through Howard Street at 20 feet, they'd wipe out half the houses. But they laid that out 167 years ago, and it's still the same basically, except Howard Street. And they bought the land, so Carteret County owned that right-of-way. And Hyde County would have inherited it or got it when it became Hyde County in 1846. It would have belonged to them. But nobody's ever claimed it to go along and open up Howard Street.
That would be really...
And Howard Street, until about 3 or 4 years ago, was soft sand the way it used to be. But then they put shells in there, and they said, you can't have shells, so now went back to the gravel. Now all these potholes. It was terrible, but it was, people had to get in there, and you just couldn't drive your car and get stuck.
So, how many people were living out here that they needed 3 stores right there? I mean, that seems like a lot.
You have to realize that we were totally isolated. We lived on our own, basically. And in fact, that's why we say until World War II, my cousin had the best word for it. He said we lost our innocence in World War II whenever all the outside people came in, the roads. And it's true, because we were totally isolated. You had to come by freight boat, which was 4.5, 5 hours, and everybody got seasick. Coming by mailboat, everybody got seasick. It was really rough on a fishing boat. And going the other way up the beach, that was like going through safari in Africa to get here. And so as a result, the only people that came were some hunters and fishermen, and most of them were friends of people that lived here.
So how many? So
It was about population,
yeah.
about 500, somewhere varied. But you had to realize when you say a population of 500, they weren't here. There was never over about 250 or so before World War II because all the men were away working. But they'd come home, and they'd come home once or twice a year, and they were so entrenched in the dredging and all up there, even their government jobs, they went back and they'd get right on again.
Yeah.
And they'd make room for them.
So where did they go? To Virginia or?
They went to Philadelphia, to Boston, to Baltimore.
Is that what your father did? Did your father?
Yeah, he was on. I got his discharge was hanging on the wall in there from World War One. It says he entered as a dredger.
And he was in Virginia dredging?
No, he was in Philadelphia. He worked for the city dredging. And then a lot of them were on the Corps of Engineers dredgers. Even during World War II, they were on that.
Yeah. Well, even I heard even up to the 50s and 60s.
Yes. And when the war broke out, there were, in fact, it's interesting that if the population was 500 or 540 or something like that, even the ones that were away, there's over 20% of the people served in military service, and that doesn't include all the one. I've got a few names in there that were on the Corps of Engineers dredgers, but they were captains and all. But there were loads of other ones that were on the Army Corps of Engineers dredgers that don't even count. So we had way over 20% of the total population, children and all, that were in military service.
That's outstanding.
For this little village, I mean, it's.
Did you ever talk to your grandmother about what it was like, or your great grandmother about what it was like when the men were away, what life was like for the women that were, and kids that were still home?
Oh yeah, well, I know my grandmother wasn't out of the yard for 35 years. And we took her away when I was in 6th grade. They flew her out in a plane, and they got her out to, Stanley Wayhap Hotel was there, and it was all, they used to taxi the planes almost up to the front of the hotel. It was flat beach. And David Driscoll used to fly down here all the time, Hatteras and here and Manio.
Who's David Driscoll?
He was one of the pilots who was down here. And he'd land on the beach. And my dad and my aunt, they took her out. She had bad teeth, I guess, and she was really ill and restricted from the teeth. And she hadn't been out of the yard for years. I mean, she went out till somebody was sick. This yard here.
This yard right here.
If somebody was sick now, she'd go there. She'd go if somebody was sick or somebody died or something like that. But other than that, she didn't go anywhere. My grandfather used to go all the time. He was a good friend of Lindsey Warren, who became Comptroller General of the United States after 15 years under Roosevelt. In fact, Lindsey Warren used to come and stay here. In fact, at my aunt's house, I'll show his picture still hanging on the wall. Big portrait of him. But my granddad used to travel all the time and go around. But when he was younger days, he used to sail on a lot of schooners, told his story. But my grandmother was always home. And the thing was that we had cattle. We had sheep that made their own clothes. My grandfather tells a lot about that. And in fact,
your grandfather talks about making his own clothes?
No, he told about how it was. And my aunt typed that back in 1935, I guess. It was 35. And then I've got it in the books, all the stories. And they made most of their own clothing and everything else and spun their own wool. And they did everything. When they killed a calf or something, or a cow, they'd steer. They'd all share. And all the women would go and make sausage and everything else, and they'd salt a lot of it, put it away.
Did they just go to one person's house and do that?
Yeah, like Cousin Jones used to be up there, and Dad came down and cut it up and such. And everybody would eat meat. But they'd eat a lot of it and give it out to everybody else. If somebody caught a big 80-pound drum, everybody ate drum. I mean, they were all shared everything, which you don't see. They still do a little bit. There's people that brought me fish, and they'll bring things over, or something. But you only see this amongst the old people. You don't see the young people have no concept of what it was like.
So that's one of those characteristics that's
it was all family, and sure, there were people that didn't talk to each other because they were angry or something for a while or something, but it was very close, and they love to see strangers. I mean, my granddad, people would come down fishing or something on their boat, and they'd get off and they'd come into the store. And my grandma and grandfather's house here, we have a monstrous dining room, a big table. I don't know how she did it, because you have to realize you didn't go to the store and buy meat or any of that. She had everybody had a big chicken yard out here. Where my garage is, used to be a big chicken yard, and we had a couple hundred chickens.
Did you have geese or ducks?
Yeah, some of them had geese and ducks, and you could go kill your geese and ducks whenever you wanted geese and ducks. You went out and shot one, brought it home.
So did you start hunting when you were little?
No, I didn't.
No.
I hunted out in Idaho. I should say that I did go duck hunting, but not too much. Because they always had it. It was always here, and we didn't hear that long. But, yeah, they always had fowl, and they had fish and oysters and everything else. I used to go with my granddad when he wanted clams. We just walked up here about past the second house, made a left, and we went all the way up Trent. It was not that far. Now it's a long way because you got to go all the way around on these roads. Then you went through the footpaths by people's houses and went right to the water, and 15 minutes later we were back. We took a burlap sack and a rake, and we were back with a half bag of clams. In fact, shrimp. My dad told me he's never eaten crab or shrimp. I always liked. He said it was trash.
That's what I heard.
It was hog food. He used to go out in the sound right along the shore, and it was only ankle deep water. And he used to get a bucket and scoop up the shrimp and take it and throw it over into the hog pen for the hogs to eat.
Yeah.
And it was hog food. And he would never eat shrimp.
So what did he eat? Croaker? What did he eat? Drum?
Oh, they eat drum, tailor, blues, and mackerel.
Did he eat flounder?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my always favorites. You like flounder.
So did your grandma that lived here, did she ever come visit your father? She never left that. Did she ever leave the island?
Yeah, in 1887, James Horatio Williams went up here on. That was not on the Carrigan, though. He had got rid of the Carrigan. In fact, the Carrigan, I always wondered if he was on it, but it wasn't. He had sold it. The Carrigan went down on Frying Pan Shoals in 1885, in December. But he didn't own it then. He was on, he had the, some things just slipped my mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he took she and her sister to get her wedding trousseau, and they went to New York and Philadelphia, and on a schooner.
Wow.
And so she was away then. But other than that,
So
she didn't even go out much on the island.
She went from an extreme of being here to New York and Philadelphia and then back.
Yeah, and then she didn't go anywhere.
Did she talk about those trips at all?
Yeah, she did with my cousin, Euphemia Gaskins Ennis, who's down here now. She's up there by the water tower.
Euphemia is her name?
Yeah, Euphemia. And
That's
that was her
interesting.
grandmother's. That was her grandmother's name. That was my grandmother's sister. But my grandmother told Femi quite a bit about it because she told me she was up in the long room looking at some of the old stuff in the old house. We had a long room, the doors still upstairs off that room. My wife told me, you can't paint it. You got to keep it the same. It's blue on one side, brown on the other.
And
Doesn't match the room.
What does that mean, long room?
Well, the old house, here's pictures of it. There's pictures right here on the wall. That's a painting of it. There's another picture with the Cape Jesmonds back in 1939. This is the painting of it. That's the way it looks. And of course, all the way around it. Well, it was two houses. One house and the other house all on top of the sea. And that's the picture back there in 1939.
Are we in this house?
No, this is the new house. This is one of the building. Those was the design. And they were 100 years old and they freeze and built. But we lost them in the 80s. Had a big freeze. But no, she just, I mean, they were so busy. I can remember my grandmother, she was 88. She used to have hair almost down to her waist. It was gray. And she'd get up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and there were two stairways in that house, one in the front and one in the back. Came down the kitchen, And she'd come down and start the fires and all about 5 o'clock in the morning, and she'd be in that kitchen working and cooking, and she'd go out and kill chickens, and there was so much to do. You did everything. You made your own butter. You made everything.
But yet you still had time to get together with family.
Oh yeah, they come visit me. This Sarah Jane Oden.
Mm-hmm.
She was an O'Neill. With my grandmother's cousin. Sarah Jane would come to visit. My granddad said they'd come to visit once a year. And they never took the clothes off. They'd sit and talk all day and all night. We used to make a joke about it.
Yeah.
But no, they visited. But she didn't go away. She'd stay right here.
Mm-hmm.
And but by 8:30 at night, she was combing her hair. I could see her sitting over in the corner in the rocker now. My grandfather, this is his rocker. He used to sit in the other corner. And when radios first came out, my dad bought him a radio, and he'd sit there and listen to the old fiddlers on there in Nashville. And but their life was very, very busy. They had to make all their own breads. In fact, my grandfather tells about, he said, and this had to be back in probably in the 1880s, probably in the early 1880s, when he was going on the schooners.
Yeah.
And he said, I was so happy, I just couldn't. We had come back from New York or somewhere. It was up on the schooner hauling coal or something. He said, I got home and we had picked up a barrel of flour. And he wasn't living here then, he was living up Trent. And he said, we went over to the neighbor's house and got a bed sheet, and we took the barrel of flour, and their white flour, and I had to realize that all they had was cornmeal. They traded their fish and stuff on the mainland to get corn, and they'd mill the corn. So they always had dark bread. Well, he said it was such a thrill. He said, I couldn't sleep just thinking about that light bread that I was going to get the next morning. And what they did was saw that barrel in half on this big bed sheet, and then they cut it in half, and they each took half of the white flour. And he said it was packed so hard it never even fell out.
Wow.
And,
so those light rolls really meant
that was
something.
I love those. My grandmother used to make the real light rolls. And she'd make big pans of them, and she cooked them on the wood stove. And one time, I was about 15 or so, I guess, I ate 18 of those light rolls before dinner. Then I ate more with dinner.
I always hear about light rolls, I'm not a servant.
I love them. Oh, when they first come off, when they're first done, they're still warm with butter. Oh, that's just luscious.
Nothing like an 18-year-old boy either.
No.
Well, is there anything that you think would be especially important for us to have in our oral histories that maybe other people might not be able to tell us about? What stayed the same, or is there anything that stayed the same for you, or something that we may overlook when we look at things that have changed? Yeah.
It's very hard to find traces of what was here. Very difficult. It would be nice if, and it was very historic, that loot shack out there, loot shack hill, and I mentioned this Bob Reynolds when he was here as superintendent. I said, we talked about a parking lot out there to let people park, and a playground for kids and stuff, and people who don't want to shop, and then have a shuttle to bring people into the village. I said, that is such a high place out there. The foundations of all the buildings, I've got pictures of the whole thing with all the boardwalks between the facilities. That was the first triangulation and electromagnetic detection system, and they had another place up around Buxton and another one down south, which they could pinpoint the submarines out there.
Yeah.
And that detection system, it's much more sophisticated now because I've worked on those systems in the military over the years, but they never declassified that until 1976.
So that means it was still part of the military? Or?
Well, they just didn't bother declassifying it. It was classified during World War II, obviously.
Yeah.
And because they even had detonation, I think, where they could actually detonate mines that were out there in a minefield if they were near a submarine or something, but I'm not sure of that part of it. But that thing was a very important piece of equipment. Now, it didn't do any good because the Germans came and they torpedoed everything in sight. They wanted the biggest things that they picked out against the silhouette, against the lights on the mainland. Oh yeah, out here. In fact, that's the biggest. World War II was the biggest Navy, or not Navy, but maritime casualties in U.S. history. There were 498 ships torpedoed and sunk off the East Coast, not just here, but you have to realize that there were like 50 to 60 ships a day passing Cape Hatteras. And as German submarines were limited, they only had fuel to get over and back and time to make fire some torpedoes.
So they wanted a good fire spot.
Yeah, and what they did, they picked, and they wouldn't waste the torpedoes on small boats or anything. They waited for all the biggies and all the big tankers. And they just sat and they picked out the one they wanted. And in fact, they sunk three, the one submarine. There was one convoy. I can't recall the number of it. It's in my book. And there was one submarine came in. He fired a whole series of torpedoes at this armada of ships, or this convoy. And I think that was in July of '42. I'm not sure what date anymore. It's in my book. Correct date. But he fired a series of torpedoes. The Bluefields was sunk immediately. The Chalor got hit, not sunk, but got hit, and the Mowinkle got hit. These are big freighters. Well, both of these, the Chalor, we have one black family now. Artist Bryant was on the Chalor. And he hadn't been home in years. He lived in Philadelphia, and he worked on the dredges, and then he went in the merchant marine during World War II, and he was on the Chalor. And that was the first time he was home in 16 or 18 years.
So he had actually come from Ocracoke.
No, he was on this ship out of Philadelphia, where he was shipping from, and they brought him in here after the Chalor was torpedoed. Well, it's funny what happened. Both of them that got hit didn't sink. They started heading toward shore. Well, they dispatched two Navy tugs to come tow them into the shore so they could make repairs and then get them out. Well, what they did was they cleared the minefield, because there's a minefield off here, a friendly minefield.
Friendly minefield?
It was U.S. owned. The Coast Guard, in fact, it's in the book too. I can't remember his name now. But it's they had it all around Cape Hatteras. And anyway, the two Navy tugs came and they cleared part of the minefield so they could pull the Chalor and the Mowinkle in toward the beach and make repairs and then throw them out and get them back to Norfolk. Well, they cleared part of the minefield, but not quite enough, because the Sheena was one of the tugs named J.P. Morgan. And one was pulling on the bow and one on the stern. Well, the Sheena was back on the stern as they pulled her in. And the Sheena swung too far to one side and hit a mine and sunk the Sheena. Well, I got pictures of the Sheena and the J.P. Morgan, and there's pictures of the Coast Guard taking them off there. And these pictures are just some pictures of Coast Guard fellows have here. They didn't exist, and it's hard to tell what they are. They were very small. I had to blow them up. And then the Mowinkle, they salvaged, they got it fixed up, they got it back to Norfolk, put it back in service. The Chalor, I didn't think I had a picture, but I'm pretty sure I got a picture of it right now.
But now this black man came off the ship
Well,
and settled here.
what they had was they had tar paper shacks on the other side of the Coast Guard station out towards the water, where they brought all the survivors in. Well, they never let survivors out of the base. I mean, they kept them there until they debriefed them and they transported them to Mordic City, usually. And they brought him in, and this Union Gaskins, she was only 15, she was working in the canteen at the base. And he came in and talked to her, and she didn't know him because he had been gone for 16 years. He was living up in Philadelphia working. And, but anyhow, they let him off the base, and he came home and spent one night, and he went back to the base, and he shipped out. And I don't think he ever came back to Ocracoke again, but he used to write to his wife, used to write to his mother. And Muse lives 2 doors from me now. She's 98. She's still alive, his sister.
Is she black anymore?
She's yeah. She's the only one left from the Bryant family. They were here from the Civil War. That was a black family that came here. And
Why did they come here?
black slaves, a few that were here, apparently went away. But they came here. Leonard Lenny from here, Brian from Engelberg area, I think. And Lenny, I'm not sure where Lenny was from. But anyway, they came here at the war. No. And
I'm gonna ask her if she likes something cold.
oh,
Thank you.
Running the mask.
yes, I'm being taped.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
But anyway, the Chaloro, they took it in tow, and they got him ashore, and it was confusing. When I was writing the book, I couldn't figure out. Everybody said, yeah, we know when he came in. He came in on Sunday night. They brought him down to the base.
Mm-hmm.
But the ships were all torpedoed on Wednesday. And I thought it was on there, but I couldn't prove it. Well, now I have the list, since the book is out, I now have the list of the crews on all those ships that went down. I have some of the radio logs off them where they were torpedoed, off the Chalora, as a matter of fact. I turned them all into the museum. I gave them a graveyard, and I just made copies. But Chalora, after they towed it out, they got it up right in the shipping channel going into Chesapeake Bay, and it sunk on it.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
talked to the fellow up there that was on the tug that was trying to get it out of the way, and they couldn't. They dynamited it, and it didn't work, so they brought another salvage company and dynamited it to get it out of the shipping channel. But they lost it totally.
Well, you know, we teach history of World War II in school. We never talk about what's happened here. It's interesting.
The thing is that, you know, the war, you always talk about being in the Pacific and being in the Atlantic, and you're over in Europe and France. And just 6 weeks after the war, we were on the front line. 3 miles offshore, to 50 miles offshore. It was all being torpedoes and people being killed and fires and explosions.
Well, I've heard people here talk about seeing
Yeah.
the fires.
Well, yeah, I was here in the summer, and I heard the explosions, and I saw them bring the people in. I saw them bring the wreckage in from the bombers went down. And it's just, the war was right here. And yet people weren't, I won't say they were afraid. However, my one cousin, Blanche Styron, down here, she was unreal, but every time she'd come in, she had been up north, and when the war started, she came back home. Her husband was up there. And Carolyn tells the story. Said every time she'd come in Mother's house, she'd always lock the back door in case the Germans came ashore, and nobody ever locked their house.
I would have thought that would have been quite, quite a turning point on the island.
They were a little afraid, my aunt. My aunt, I guess, tells a story about, she asked my granddad, she said, are the Germans going to come ashore? And he said, honey, if they come ashore, we aren't going to be here.
Where were they going to go? Do you think? Just hop in a boat and
Get in
leave?
the boat and leave. But, I mean, there's a lot of other stories that they came ashore. Now, we didn't have any, we don't really know. There were people that came here before the war started, an artist colony.
I haven't heard about that.
And you had to realize that everybody who came here came by mailboat, usually, came the other way, and you knew who came,
Right,
and you knew when they left, and you knew who they were,
right.
especially if they were a stranger. Well, these people were here, and they were making paintings and all. Nobody cared. I mean, they were painting, but they were asking all kinds of questions about buoys and markers and things, and it was Madame Charisse
Madam
and her husband and some others, and the man not been spies at all. But they stayed at the Stanley Way Inn, and sometime later on, the Coast Guard or Navy, we don't know which, I don't think, rounded them up and took them out of here. Well, after the war, she had an art studio in New York, so they may or may not have been.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
Calvin tells some stories about when he was working in the hotel, he'd go and check the rooms out and this and that, and they never did find anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tease my Aunt Elizabeth because she has an invitation, my cousin still has, and says, Mr. and Mrs. R. W. Howard are invited to Madame Charisse's cocktail party. So here you're the fifth columnist here.
Yeah.
And, but they did take him out of here, and but we don't really know. And they may have been landed in a submarine, but that was, I think they were probably landed before the war
Yeah,
started.
you said that was true.
They were already here, yeah.
I hadn't heard about the artist colony on that.
Well, it wasn't, it was just a group of people, I think. I don't even know how many there were.
Did they live here full time?
Oh, they were living here right then, just for a short time. I don't know how long they were here. Calvin can tell you more of that. There's funny stories like that. It's certainly just that road coming in and building that up out there. It's changed everything. It's just not like it was, and it's all because of the road and the war. And it exposes to all those other people, and they still come.
Yeah.
And today I'm hearing from other sailors that were here, and I'm gathering all their names. I'll put it into the library copy, because I can put those in loose leaves so I can build the books up. And we've got 42 pictures from one fellow in Connecticut.
And he had just come down on what, a merchant?
He was stationed here twice.
Navy.
In the Navy during the war. He was here twice. Pacific, I think, and came back. And he sent us 42 pictures in the classrooms, and the Quonset huts, and formations, and all kinds of things.
So did you know of many people who willingly married the Navy?
Oh, yeah, that was because, remember, most of the men were gone, working away, and then they went into service too, and a lot of them were already in the Coast Guard from overseas in different places, and the Navy. And sure, all the young girls were around. In fact, this one I told you, Gaskins Ennis, she was 15 when she married her husband here. He was in the Navy.
Wow.
And that's how she got to move up north to Wilmington. She married him, and there's a whole series of them that married Coast Guard and Navy boys. And of course, they always did get exposed to the Coast Guard, but not the Navy.
Not in those numbers either.
And there's a lot of them that married Navy and Coast Guard fellows. And they're all in my book. Let's face it, there wasn't a lot of fellows down here.
Right.
They went away to work. So and three fellows, my uncle Robert Wayhat Howard, Thurston Gaskell, and Wilbur Gaskell. Thurston Gaskell was working on a bug-eye freight boat that was owned by Stanley Wayhat up in Chesapeake Bay.
What's a bug-eye freight boat?
It's like a sailboat, but it had a diesel engine. It also had one mast, and if the wind was right, they put the sail up, but they used that boom, and they had a boom on that mast that they could lift freight and stuff on. In fact, if you had a car on this island before 1955 or so, had to come on by freight boat, and they brought it, laid it across the deck over the hole.
Where would you drive in all that sand?
Well, he rode in the sand, and they had the one-lane wilderness here, and he rode on that, but if anybody came along, they had to get off, so that one had to give way to the other. But it only went from place to, and my grandfather had a Model T. It was like probably the first car on the island. He had a horse stable out here, and he had the gate up here, and no license, of course, and he had the Model T brought over, and first thing he did, he didn't know how to drive, and he went in, and he didn't know how to stop it. He went right through the stable doors, and he stood there and laughed and laughed. But there was Thurston and Wilbur and Wayham. Thurston was captaining the bug-eye freight that Stanley owned, and that Stanley sold to the Navy, and the Navy said, well, if you join the Navy, we'll keep you on it. So he came back, and he was the first class, and they made him a chief petty officer. And he ran that freight boat to bring freight back and forth from Cherry Point and wherever across. And my Uncle Wayhab went in, they made him a first class, he went in, and then they brought him back home, and he stayed here all during the war until they got this guy. He was the chief. And then Wilbur used to run the Liberty boat, was an old PT boat that they'd take people off because remember the island was dry. So this was like the end of the world to some poor guys that were raised in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. And a few of them drank wood alcohol and killed themselves.
They weren't used to that high test.
But he ran the Liberty boat, used to run them over to the mainland to get them out of here. And then other times they had to go by mailboat to get out of here.
So they'd go out to Would they go to Washington or would they go up to Wilmington, Delaware?
Well, the bug-eye freight boats used to go to Washington once or twice a week, and then the mailboat, of course, went every day back and
Yeah.
forth to Atlantic. And
So that's where
they
they
usually
take their
went up
lead.
north end. But, yeah, a lot of the fellows married in, like Theodore Mutual, is still living.
Mm-hmm.
And
Theodore Mutual?
Mutual, M-U-T-L-O, he was from Chester, Pennsylvania. And he's in the movie, you know, we made it. Have you seen Warzone?
No.
Well, we made Warzone. It's 3 hours. It's 90 minutes each. There's two tapes
No.
that Kevin Lucas made.
It's a documentary?
Yes, at World War II. It's very excellent.
Oh, where do you get it?
Well, they're for sale here in the museum.
Okay.
And the Graveyard Atlantic gets credit. Whenever they're sold, we get some percentage.
Okay.
And, but he
Making a
tells,
shopping list here.
yeah, he tells the whole story of Theodore when he came in. He and Mac Womack, they came in. They were young fellows in the Coast Guard. They just gotten in. He was in Louisiana. And in January of '42, they brought him down here on an old truck. They brought him down the Coast Guard truck down the beach from Hatteras. They got him across the bar and drove him to the village. And he got here behind where the community store is today down there. Well, that was all just soft sand track. Everybody walked along the waterfront on foot,
Yeah.
went through the porches. Well, now it's all turned around. The road was nothing. It was wagon traffic up there. Well, that's where they stopped. And he was from Chester, Pennsylvania. He said, "Where's the town?" Yeah, I said, "You're right in the middle of it right now. You want to get out?" He said, "I've seen enough."
Yeah. Shoot, it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that
But then
different.
he figured he was at the end of the world. But then he got married to a girl here. He said, "Better not take your shoes off and get sand between your toes and you never get away."
Mm-hmm. And so he's still here. Did they move away and come back? Or
No. Well, he went away to work on the dredge, I think, for a while later on. But his wife's still alive, too. She's got Parkinson's or something. He takes care of her all day, so he's really tied up taking care of her.
Well, there's one question I want to ask you that I'm curious about. There's a lot of these oral histories that have been done on the banks kind of make it seem as if it's all one big community out there. And one of the things that we're looking at is how the communities are distinctive one from the other. I wonder if you could say a few words about how Ocracoke Village is distinct in character or in geography or whatever from, Rodanthe or Hatteras and Mantua. What
Well,
makes it?
there are people related in all these villages, related to us. Beatrice McCarthy, who they just moved to California recently, was up there and we were in a meeting, I guess it's been a year and a half ago. And I had 3 or 4 of my couple cousins with me.
Yeah.
And she said, "Do you know?" She said, "I didn't even know her before, and we're related in 2 ways." And I said, "No, Auntie, 3 ways." You mean with Clarissa Daly? She married my step-great-grandfather. And so it's 3 ways. And then my one cousin was Euphemia and Calvin, and Calvin's sister was there, and we're all double cousins. And he said, "If you related to Earl in 3 ways, then you related to me in 3 ways, her in 3 ways, her in 3 ways, and her in
Sort of
3 ways."
exponentially.
Yeah, so it just goes on, and that's true today. Most of them up there. But you know let's go back to Chickamacomico. Chickamacomico in the early 1700s was the place to be. It was in O'Neill's Corners. I have no idea where that's at. This is back in Christopher's day, way back.
In Christopher's days?
Well,
Is that a saying?
that's one of the O'Neills, Christopher O'Neill's up there, somewhere north and south. And then he had a son, John. Well, there was a Christopher deal before that Christopher was a tax collector for the whole thing, all the way down the Carolina coast, all the way to Southport and down that way. So he had to originate out of the colony somewhere up there, and I haven't been able to tie it all together yet. But they were all basically the same as far as, in the old days, they used to sell the hides. They raised cattle out here even before people owned it. And they shipped the hides back. I don't know what they did with the meat. They certainly didn't eat it all. They probably just destroyed the meat and shipped the hides back to England. That was a big trade back in the early 1700s. Yeah, cattle. And they raised cattle out here, all the way in Hatteras too.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear much about that. We don't know a lot about it. But the only differences I think have occurred in more recent years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the differences were that much because, you know, what was funny when the bridge went out back in 1991, the Oregon Bridge got hit and opened up. They went back to the old ways. When you wanted to get to Hatteras way back, you came to Ocracoke. Because all the boats came to Ocracoke, and then you go across the Hatteras, go the other way. I guess it was very hard coming through the sand and all. And of course, after the 40s and all, that's when Stock and Midget were running the bus service and all down there. That was different. That was in the 30s, just before the 40s, before the war. But most of the traffic came through here because Ocracoke Inlet was a place. But then when Hatteras Inlet opened up, that became another inlet that was used during the Civil War. So that sort of Portsmouth was declining because Ocracoke Inlet wasn't used anymore, and it died basically. It disappeared. Ocracoke, for some reason, it still remained, and we got people coming in by mailboat and such. And Hatteras was separate again on its own, even though they were all related. But over time, it was changing mainly because of the separation, the inlets opening up and changing, the way of life. I don't mean the way of life here, but the way of life as far as the overall United States, transportation changing, getting motors and gasoline engines. That changed a lot of it because what they used to do from here and Hatteras was go back and forth by sail skip, and they'd go to church camp meetings and things. And there were all kinds of clubs.
I've heard about some of those.
My grandfather used to belong to some outdoorsmen or something, and there were different names. I can't even recall them now. But they'd go and they'd go to the different church camps and things.
All up and down the banks.
Yeah, from Hatteras and Ocracoke and Ocracoke. And they'd take the whole family, sail skips. But then after you got power boats and all, by that time you were getting roads of some sort and better ways to get around. And the one that's changed, you know, one that looks to me like it's changed more than anything is Avon.
Avon?
Avon. Avon is not, if you look at Avon, it's not like Chickamacomico or Salvo or Ocracoke or Hatteras or any of them. It's all northern today.
Meaning people who come down from
the people who have migrated to that part. I know some of the people from there that live down in Beaufort and some are up in Elizabeth City. They don't even go back there anymore. They hate it. And yet the little town.
New Yorkers and Philadelphians, those kind of
I don't know where they're from, but it's just a different. And that's why you got this shopping mall and all that up there. It's a different culture. That's different, more so in Chickamacomico and Salvo and all. It's just beginning to change now because they didn't have a water system until a couple of years ago. So that was slow in coming. And now they're growing. But, and we got our water system in 75, I think it was. Yeah, 75. But that has a lot to do with it too. How it's changed, getting water, and we got electricity, and Stanley Wayhab brought in and put an electric plant up in 1939. And that's why it said the Stanley Wayhab Hotel, and the Spanish Casino was an electrified hotel with this and that.
The environment. Was that pretty much where the electric place was? So you got your ice, did you get ice there? Or?
Well, they used to bring ice cream on the mailboat. I can remember running with a pair of ice tongs. My city feet were very tender in the hot sand, and I had to go from down there by the docks, break down here, and we came from footpaths, we can go down that road, that was a long way. But cutting through there with those ice tongs, I think I had an ice cube by the time I got home, and it was summer. But nickel piece ice or something like that.
Where'd your friends back in Philly or wherever you were living? Did you tell them about coming here? Could they?
You know, it's funny. I never brought him down here. My buddy came down. He was almost blind. He came down. He was in his 70s. He came here for the first time. All growing up, he grew up from 7 years old on. He had never come here until about 3 years ago, and he came for the first time, and he can't see it.
So you really didn't, those two rows of police
They were
completely
separate.
separate from you.
Separate. This was get away from the concrete.
That's a whole other interesting thing must be to talk about, just how.
Well, when I wandered around here, we'd go wander in the woods up Trent there. There were no paths or anything. You'd get lost in the woods, even though it was 47 acres in a dense jungle. In 47 acres, you get lost because nobody was living up there anymore. And it was just spiders and snakes. It was great for me coming out of the city. And every house we went by would invite me in to eat. I could eat 3 or 4 times a day. And yet, water was lousy, it was yellow, it had wiggles in it.
What do they do for water, for drinking water?
Catch it off the roof in the rain gutters. We had cisterns, or we had a rain barrel. And it's funny, just a couple of years ago, the lady over here, mother, her name now, Carson, anyway, she said, my mother used to send me over to Aunt Helen's to get a bucket of that nice, cool water. And I said, cool water out of our old cistern that was yellow and all this, but it was made out of brick, And it was a big cistern, it was about 7 foot in diameter and deep. And she said, it was so nice and cool, and I can remember pumping that water into the sink with a hand pump into the kitchen and with cheese cross over it, take all the wigglers out and mosquito eggs and stuff. And it was yellow, and it tasted terrible, and you put a little chlorine in once in a while, once a month or so. And but she was saying how cool that was, and how great it was. And I said, your mother didn't have a sister, did she? She said, no, we just had a rain barrel, a conch shell, and everybody drank out of the conch shell. And we had a drank the same way. But we happen to have it. We used to have a sister here. I don't have it anymore. But yeah, the water was terrible. That's why the kids, when I came here, we drank, it was Coca-Cola and Royal Crown Cola, and they were high. Knee-high.
Knee-highs, yeah.
Because it came out first. And that, if you want grape or something, you got a knee-high.
Yeah.
But it was all Coca-Cola. And there were cases all over the place. Everybody drank Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola and more Coca-Cola.
The locals too?
Well, too, yeah, that's all they drank because the water was terrible.
So they had some teeth problems, I guess.
Probably.
Yeah.
But the water was miserable.
It's like being in Mexico or something.
Yeah, that's just, but hey, they lived. They lived well, and they lived to be old, too.
Yeah.
Dad lived there,
They probably had great immune systems.
Yeah.
Built up lots of-
My father was 97, my grandfather was 90, my grandmother was 89. They all lived long lives. In fact, I think my grandmother was 98.
Did they have to go off island to go to the doctors and stuff? Or did they pretty much stay here?
Sometimes, when Carl Kurtz wrote a book back in the 60s, I guess, and said all the things that Ocracoke didn't have. It didn't have any police, it didn't have any lawyers, it didn't have any doctors, it didn't have any this, and it went on and on and on, this whole list of what it didn't have. And you didn't tolerate that, but when you wanted a doctor, at different times there were doctors who were visiting or fishing or something, so you might, nobody that you would go to the doctor's office and visit, but sometimes it was a doctor. We always had like a midwife, we always had a registered nurse usually that took care of birthing, and they had their home cures that they used, and it worked.
Did you ever get privileged enough to experience a home cure?
I severed a nerve in my foot and cut it one year down here, and all they did was put peroxide on it and pour the peroxide, and they picked it off. I didn't realize till 50 years later that I had severed a nerve in my foot. But, the Coast Guard in those days always took people out. If there was an emergency, the Coast Guard had a fast boat, anybody else would not. And then they had to go get after World War II, of course, they took them out by choppers. A marine chopper took somebody out of here the other day.
Still doing that,
Yeah, and so you put up with those things, and people may have died that didn't make it to a doctor or something in time, but was a way of life,
Yeah.
and it was the best you had. So it's not. I mean, it's what you become accustomed to. I think.
Yeah.
Today you think it's horrible if you can't go to the doctor or something, but my grandmother, we were flying her away for her way to get her teeth fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Moving.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather said when they got her out to the hotel, he said, "See, she's half cured already, just getting out of the yard."
Yeah, that was the grandmother that stayed with the long gray hair.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You've
You're
told me so
welcome.
many things and given me some good names. Is there anything you want to say or any questions you want to ask me? Or...
No, I think just if we can coordinate this and get with the folks.
Yeah.
You may want to talk to Calvin O'Neill.
Calvin, I think I have it. Let me just check it. I was doing
He was right across from the church, back in the bushes there. There's a little circular drive that got in there.
Does he have a phone?
Yeah,
I'll give him a call then.
Calvin O'Neill. He's right across from the church, the Methodist church out there.
Okay.
And it's a little circular drive. He's right by the school and the church.
Okay.
And you probably want to talk to Euphemia Gaskins. Gaskins. Well, it's not Gaskins, it's Ennis now.
Ennis?
E-N-N-I-S.
Okay.
She's up there near the water tower.
All right. I will. I'll give him a call and make another trip down.
And if you want to talk to Blanche Stein, she's another one who can tell you about the story. Oh, you definitely need to talk to Blanche Stein. Yeah. Especially if you're doing something on the highway. Because her husband was the supervisor. Definitely need to talk to her. And she was here all during the war too.
That's great.
And then if you coordinate that with them, because I would like to have a lot of those tapes to put in the museum here.
Absolutely.
And we're going to share them all along all the museums.
Well, that's our intention too, is to make them just as available as they
Yeah, I know
can.
Mella's aware. He said you had $40,000 to do it. And we were going for 50, I think, but ours is going to be split between 3 projects.
Yeah. I don't know, this project originated, I mean, the Park Service put out a call for proposals. And so actually the people who won the proposal are in California. But anyway. I don't know all the politics. I don't want to know all the politics.
No.
But I